Yeah.
Just a straight question. You grew up in New York?
Yeah.
In city, Long Island?
Riverdale, which is the northern suburb right outside Manhattan.
And you live in...
I live in Westchester now, which is a little bit further north from there. Yeah, about a half hour from Manhattan. So.
You wouldn't want to move from New York to LA, huh?
I wouldn't want to live in LA, no. I would want to live on the West Coast somewhere, but, you know, I have 3 kids, and I don't see that happening. But no. Are you selling a house or something?
You're right. It's just, so, New York.
East Coast based, yeah.
East Coast.
I know, I wrote a screenplay. I adapted a Steve Martin novella called The Pleasure of My Company, which is set in Santa Monica, and I actually had to move to Santa Monica for about 2 weeks just to sort of understand Santa Monica, because it's very hard to write in places that you're not familiar with, and that's why most of my books end up in... I could set a book in Texas, but I have to go live in Texas, and, I don't want to live in Texas. So, that's it. Yes?
It's actually in the same vein of that question. For example, if I wanted to take up writing, I would be told, write what you know. So then my question to you is there a particular character that is based on you or offshoot or what you know? Or
no, I mean, I think when they say write what you know, I mean, is Stephen King writing what he knows? Like, they infuse it in a world that you know. I think you can make a lot of stuff up, but you have to make it authentic by setting it and grounding it in stuff that can feel authentic. That's why I don't write about, like I said, I don't set something in Texas, because if I wrote something in Texas without going there and figuring out Texas, people reading it wouldn't feel, what you're feeling now about the way I write about the East Coast. These characters, I mean, none of them are about me, but there's a piece of me in all of them, and not just the lead characters, and because, you can only write from your own experience. You can't, so none of this stuff factually has ever happened to me, but emotionally there are emotional truths, and there are social truths, and there are things I've gone through that find themselves, through allegory and metaphor and outright lying into the books, but yeah. There's, what I know is this world and these kinds of people, because that's the world I come from. Yeah, that's all. Yes?
Was there a book that you enjoy writing more than others, or you enjoy the final product more than others?
This Is Where I Leave You, which was my last book, I struggled with for a very long time, because it started out as a very different book, and, it started out as a book about a guy whose life sort of falls apart in a certain way, and I was 100 pages in, and it wasn't really going well. And then I wrote a chapter where he goes. My last book, which was called "This Is Where I Leave You," was about a guy who basically what the book is now. What the book came out to be is about a guy who, while he's going through a divorce from his wife, who he just discovered was sleeping with his boss. Has to go home because his father has died, and left this last request behind that his family get together and sit Shiva for him. And the book takes place over the 7 days that this sort of crazy family has to live under one roof again and just deal with each other. And when I started out writing the book, it had nothing to do with that. It was just about this guy who lives in the suburbs who finds his wife and his boss in his bed and loses all the things that he felt defined who he was. He loses his job, his wife, his house, and has to kind of rediscover who he is again. And I was writing the book, and it was 100 pages in, and it was really quite dull. And then I wrote a chapter where he goes home to his family, his parents' house for his father's 70th birthday. And when I wrote that chapter, and I wrote about his siblings, and I wrote about his parents, that was the first time in the whole book that the book started to feel like a good book to me, and the characters started to come alive to me. So I decided I needed to make the book about this family, and then I had 100 pages I had written that I didn't want to throw out, so I was trying to weave this family back into the book, and of course that doesn't work, and at some point you have to make the decision to throw out everything you've written and start again, and that took a while for me to decide, and then I had to figure out, how do I get a guy who's going through what he's going through to spend more than 10 minutes with this family? And so then I had this idea of a Shiva, and then I struggled with that because I had written 4 books before that without any reference to Judaism, and now I'm going to write a book about a Shiva, and do I want to get into that? And, so by the time I actually got the book written, I had been through so many struggles and processes that I was just, I felt really satisfied that the book came out so well, because I really thought for a while I was going to just have to find another job. So,
It's a great book.
no, thank you. Thanks. Yes.
Me?
Sure.
Well, I'm a huge fan of yours, and I read that book and I enjoyed it very much.
Thank
But
you.
my question is about criticism. How you react on criticism, and does it affect you at all? And if it does, so whose criticism is affecting
You mean criticism
Yes.
like from regular people or
Anybody.
from the newspapers or?
Anybody.
I mean, I think the authors who say they don't read it are liars for the most part, because I've tried not to, and then I still end up reading it at some point. It does affect me a little bit. Sometimes it pisses me off because they've gotten it wrong. Sometimes it pisses me off because they've gotten it right. You know, it's at some point you have to just ignore it and say, this is what I do, and I'm going to keep doing it. And there are going to be, like, I knew when I wrote this book there were going to be people who were offended by this book. I also knew, because the last book had been sort of universally acclaimed, that there was no way they were going to let me get off the hook with this one. And I was right. I've gotten some really nice reviews on this one. I've gotten one or two not so nice reviews, and in the moment when I first read it, I get sort of a sinking feeling in my stomach, like, then I get really angry, like, what is this guy, what does he do with his life that he spends his days tearing apart people who spent a year writing something? Like, what did he ever write besides nasty, shitty stuff about other people? And like, I get all, so, yeah, I mean, I'd like to say I'm above all that, but I'm not, and a really well-written bad review will hurt my feelings, so... Sometimes they're badly written bad reviews, and then I don't care because But when someone clearly intelligent is telling me I suck, then so yeah, I don't love it. Did you have a?
Yeah, I was curious because this is where I leave you. You told it in the first person.
Yeah.
But what you just read was told in the second person.
Third person. Yeah.
Third person. I mean, so I was curious how that decision comes to you, which way that you go
Right.
with it, and how that may feel different or not different to you as you're.
Yeah.
putting
So
it
up
together.
until this book, everything I wrote in first person because I was trying to write I was trying to own a really confessional style of writing, and then when I was writing this book, what I really once I wrote his daughter Casey, I felt like I didn't want to just experience her through his point of view. I wanted to write from her point of view as well. So I actually started out writing in two different first persons, but then I kind of got to like Denise, his ex-wife, and I wanted to write from her point of view too. And I decided to write in third person. I had always avoided third person because one of the things I felt had sort of was an identifier for me with my readers was that they loved my first person voice and like sort of the jokes and the confidence, and I was very scared to move away from that, but it took a while of working in third person. You can write a very close third person that feels like first person, as opposed to in sort of an omniscient narrator who is just telling, it's like God telling you the story, or you can write really when you're just in the head of the character, and I just chose to do it that way, and it took me a while to get used to it, and then I found it extremely liberating, so I don't know how quickly I would go back to first person at this point. Yeah, because you can tell a much bigger story, and I haven't done that here. I'm still telling a slightly smaller story, but I feel like, I'll be able to start telling bigger stories that way. So.